Aisha Kamara was sitting in her tiny hostel room in Kizoro, revising her nursing notes, when her phone rang with the call that shattered her world. The moment she heard the trembling voice on the other end say, "Aisha, your grandparents, there was an accident," her heart dropped. Mama Safia and Baba Idris weren't just grandparents to her. They were her only real family, the people who raised her with love, discipline, and hope after her parents died. Now, in a single moment, they were gone. The next hours felt like a blur. Aisha rushed home, tears blurring her vision as she traveled through the winding roads of Kizoro. The house felt unbearably quiet without her grandparents' warm presence. But the silence didn't last long. Soon, relatives she hadn't seen in years began appearing, faces she remembered, but hearts she never trusted. Her Aunt Namatsi arrived first, crying loudly, dramatically, almost theatrically. Behind her came cousins Kato and Reby, whispering to each other even as they stepped into the compound. At first Aisha thought they had come to comfort her, to stand with her in grief. But within minutes, their eyes were scanning the compound, noticing the vehicles, the land, the house. Everything her grandparents had worked their entire lives to build. Aisha watched them exchanging looks, nudging each other, their voices dropping to low whispers. It didn't take long to realize the painful truth. They weren't here for support or love or family. They were here for the inheritance. Even as Aisha wiped her tears and tried to hold herself together, she could feel their eyes lingering on her, calculating, assessing. In the middle of her deepest heartbreak, she suddenly understood. This tragedy was only the beginning of a storm she never asked for. From the moment the funeral preparations began, Aisha realized her aunt and cousins had not come to mourn. They had come to take over. Instead of comforting her, they acted like she was a housemaid who owed them obedience. Aunt Namatsi would clap her hands sharply and bark instructions like, "Aisha, bring tea," or "Aisha, go fetch water," as if Aisha wasn't grieving the same loss they were. Every time Aisha tried to sit down for a moment, someone would appear behind her with another order. It felt intentional, like they wanted to remind her of her place. Kato, with his puffed-up ego and loud mouth, kept walking around giving opinions no one asked for. He acted like the funeral was his personal project, shouting at workers, rearranging chairs, and pretending he was the one paying for everything. But whenever he passed Aisha, he'd lower his voice and make snide comments like, "Some people should just stay quiet. They contribute nothing anyway." Reby, always glued to her phone, would laugh and add, "Exactly. Even her future looks broke." They didn't even try to hide their whispers about the property. While neighbors gathered to mourn, the three of them huddled together, speaking in hushed but urgent tone. Aisha would catch bits and pieces, the gold business, the land titles, how it will be divided. Every time she walked near them, their conversation would suddenly shift to fake sympathy. "Poor Aisha," they'd say loudly, forcing sad expressions. "She must be heartbroken." But as soon as she turned her back, they'd drop the act. Aisha felt the sting of their cruelty, but she kept reminding herself that the funeral was about honoring her grandparents. She tried to ignore the gossip, the commands, the whispers that followed her like shadows. But it was hard. Grief is heavy enough on its own. Adding humiliation made it feel unbearable. The night before the burial, Aisha overheard the three of them whispering in the kitchen. Kato said, "Once everything is divided, she won't get much. She doesn't even need it." Reby laughed. "She'll be back in her hostel, struggling as usual." And then Namatsi whispered the line that broke Aisha's heart the most. "She's too soft. She won't fight us." Aisha walked away quietly. They didn't know it yet, but the world they were trying to build on her disrespect was about to crash, and she wasn't as weak as they thought. The trip to Kampala for the will reading felt tense from the start. Aisha sat quietly in the back of the car while her aunt and cousins chatted excitedly, not about the loss of Mama Safia and Baba Idris, but about money. All the way to the city, they kept guessing the value of the estate. Kato kept saying, "I know Baba had millions hidden. Today we'll finally see the truth." Reby giggled, already planning vacations and shopping trips. And Namatsi, with her usual pride, announced, "This is the day I finally get what I deserve for being the eldest. God is good." Aisha stayed silent, staring out the window. She didn't understand their confidence. Their grandparents barely spoke to them in recent years. Why were they so sure everything belonged to them? When they arrived at lawyer Samuel Nyambwa's office, the family practically stormed inside like they owned the place. The office was small but polished, with files neatly stacked and a faint smell of coffee in the air. Nyambwa rose politely to greet them, but before he could say much, Namatsi stepped forward and said loudly, "Let's start quickly. We all know the estate is huge." They grabbed the seats closest to the lawyer's desk, pushing each other to secure the important chairs. Aisha tried to sit beside them, but Kato stopped her with a hand on her shoulder and pointed to a single chair in the corner. "You sit there," he said casually, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "This is family business." Aisha felt the sting of humiliation, but she didn't argue. She quietly sat in the corner, her hands folded in her lap, watching her relatives whisper and elbow each other like children waiting for candies. Namatsi kept bragging loudly. I raised this family when no one else did. If there is land, I'll take the one in Entebbe. And those apartments? I think it's only fair they go to me. Her cousins nodded eagerly, already dividing wealth they didn't even have yet. Lawyer Nyambwa cleared his throat several times, trying to get control of the room. But the family was too busy celebrating imaginary riches. They didn't even notice Aisha watching them with quiet confusion. If they had looked closely, they might have noticed something else too, the subtle, almost knowing expression on the lawyer's face. But they were too busy dreaming of millions to see the storm waiting for them. When lawyer Samuel Nyambwa finally opened the brown envelope containing the will, the room fell into an uneasy quiet. Aisha's relatives leaned forward eagerly, their eyes shining with greedy excitement. Cato even rubbed his hands together like he was about to receive a prize. Aisha sat in the corner, nervous, unsure, wishing her grandparents were still alive so none of this had to happen. Nyambwa adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began reading. At first, the room stayed calm. But then he reached the line that changed everything. We, Safia and Idris Kamara, leave our entire estate to our granddaughter, Aisha Kamara. Silence. Real, heavy, shocking silence. For a moment, it felt like the whole office froze. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to pause. Namatsi's jaw dropped so low Aisha thought it might hit the desk. Cato blinked rapidly, like his brain couldn't process the words. Marembe's mouth hung open, her phone slipping from her hand. But Nyambwa wasn't done. He continued reading, each word slicing through the room like a blade. Aisha inherits all land parcels, the entire Idris Gold Export Company, and the 3 apartment blocks in Entebbe. Total estate value, approximately $30 million. That number, $30M, echoed in the air like thunder. Aisha's heart pounded. She stared at the lawyer, thinking she must have misheard. Her hands trembled. She wasn't expecting anything. She just wanted her grandparents back. But they had left her everything. And that was the moment her relatives snapped. What nonsense is this? Namatsi shouted, slamming her hand on the desk so hard the pen holder fell over. How can everything go to her? She is just a child. Cato jumped to his feet, pointing at Aisha like she had committed a crime. This must be a mistake, or she manipulated them. There's no way, and no way, they would choose her over us. Marembe started crying dramatically, wailing as if someone had stolen her future. This is unfair. We are the real family. The lawyer stayed calm, repeating, this is the legal will signed and witnessed. Their decision was clear. Now everyone turned toward Aisha, anger in their eyes, jealousy burning through their fake tears. She felt her stomach twist, fear mixing with disbelief. She hadn't asked for this. She never wanted to fight anyone. But looking at their furious faces, she knew. This was no longer about grief. This was war. The moment they left the lawyer's office, Aisha could feel the shift in the air. Before, her relatives treated her like a servant. Now they didn't know whether to beg her or break her. Their greed was louder than their grief. And within hours, a coordinated attack began, calculated, cruel, and completely shameless. It started with Aunt Namatsi. She knocked on Aisha's door at the hotel, suddenly speaking with a soft voice Aisha had never heard from her before. My daughter, she began dramatically, holding her chest as if she were in pain. Your grandparents were old. They must have made a mistake. Of course they meant to divide the property fairly. You know that, right? Her eyes were fake sad, but her voice was sharp underneath. You can correct this. If you truly loved your family. Aisha stood there, stunned. A mistake? After all the cruelty they had shown her? Before she could respond, Cato barged in, no softness at all. He stood with his arms crossed and said, let's talk business. Give me $5 million. Not asking. I'm demanding. I need it for dignity, for respect. I can't walk around like a loser while you enjoy everything. His tone made it clear he didn't see Aisha as family, only as a walking bank. Then came Marembe, crying loudly for attention. She hugged Aisha tightly, so tight it felt like she was checking her pockets. Please, Aisha, she sobbed. People will think we're greedy if you don't share. But later that same evening, Aisha overheard her on the phone spreading horrific rumors. Yes, she forged something. I know it. She tricked them. Aisha has always been sly, Marembe whispered. We're taking her to court. And she wasn't lying about that. Within hours, the whole family was acting like an organized team, pressuring Aisha, calling her nonstop, sending messages filled with guilt, anger, and threats. Some demanded money. Some pretended to be heartbroken. Others accused her of being a thief. It felt like they were rotating roles. The attacker, the beggar, the victim. Aisha barely slept that night. She sat on her bed hugging her bag, tears running down her face. She had lost her grandparents, and now the only family she had left was treating her like an enemy. But something inside her started to grow, strength. A quiet strength she didn't know she had. They thought she was weak. They were about to learn otherwise. Aisha thought the threats would stop after a day or two, but she underestimated her relatives' greed. When emotional manipulation didn't work and fake apologies failed, they moved to their biggest weapon, the courts. Early one morning, Aisha was served with legal papers at her hostel. Her hands shook as she opened them. Her aunt and cousins had officially filed a lawsuit accusing her of fraud, forgery, and manipulating the elderly. They wanted to force her into fear. They wanted her to panic and offer them millions just to make the case disappear. For them, it was a strategy. For Aisha, it felt like betrayal layered on top of heartbreak. Cato bragged loudly in the village that they would destroy her little student life. Reby walked around telling neighbors, "We are taking back what is rightfully ours." Aisha tricked them. And Namatsi, acting like the queen of righteousness, told everyone, "I am doing this for the family." She cannot keep everything. Aisha felt lost. She didn't have millions to hire top lawyers. She didn't even know where to start. But lawyer Samuel Nyambwa called her and said, "Come to Kampala immediately. There is something you need to see." His voice sounded different, serious, but also hopeful. When she arrived at his office, Nyambwa opened a locked drawer and took out a small USB drive. "Your grandparents prepared more than just a written will," he said. "They recorded a video. They wanted to make sure their wishes could never be twisted." Aisha stared at him, confused but curious. When he pressed play, her grandparents' faces appeared on the screen, smiling, gentle, full of love. Aisha burst into tears instantly. Mama Safia spoke first. "If you're watching this, then we have left this world, and everything we own goes to our Aisha." Baba Idris nodded. "She is the one who visited us, cared for us, respected us. The rest of the family only came when they wanted money. That is not love." They explained every detail, how they funded Aisha's education secretly, how they watched the others mistreat her, how they feared their wealth would be destroyed by greedy hands. "We choose Aisha," Baba said firmly, "not because she is the youngest, but because she is the only one with a pure heart." When the video ended, Aisha couldn't speak. The lawsuit meant nothing now. She had the truth, straight from their voices, their faces, their hearts. And soon the court would too. As Aisha watched the video of her grandparents on the lawyer's laptop, it felt like they were sitting right in front of her, speaking from the heart. Their familiar voices made her chest tighten. She missed them so deeply, but hearing their words brought a kind of warmth she hadn't felt since their passing. Mama Safia began with a gentle smile. "Aisha, my child, you might not know this, but we have been supporting you quietly for years." Aisha blinked in surprise. She had always wondered how her school fees were covered when times were hard. She thought maybe scholarships or small donations had helped her. But here was the truth. Her grandparents were the ones making sure she never dropped out. "We wanted you to study without worry," Mama said softly. "You were always the one who valued education." Baba Idris leaned closer to the camera, his eyes full of pride. "We watched how you took care of us, how you traveled long hours just to spend weekends with us, how you called, checked on us, and never complained." His voice grew firmer. "Loyalty like yours is rare. You never asked for anything. You loved us without conditions." Then their expressions changed, sadness mixed with disappointment. "We also saw how the rest of the family treated you," Mama continued. "They laughed at you, ignored you, used you, and looked down on you." Her voice cracked slightly. "It hurt us more than you know." Baba nodded slowly. "They only showed up when there was money involved. They never cared for us unless they needed something. They never respected you. We could not leave everything in the hands of people who only think of themselves." Aisha wiped her tears, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. "At the end of our lives," Baba said firmly, "we agreed on one thing. Our wealth must be protected from greedy hands. You are the only one we trust to honor what we built." Mama smiled again, full of love. "Aisha, you are our pride. Our legacy lives safely with you." By the time the video ended, Aisha's hands were shaking. She felt overwhelmed, but also incredibly seen. Her grandparents had understood her pain, her struggles, her heart, even the things she never said out loud. For the first time since their deaths, she felt their love wrap around her again. And now she understood. She wasn't chosen by accident. She was chosen because she earned it. The High Court of Uganda was packed the day Aisha's case was heard. Reporters, neighbors, curious strangers, and distant relatives all came to witness what had become the talk of Kampala. Aisha sat quietly beside lawyer Nyambwa, her hands clasped tightly, her heart pounding. Her relatives, on the other hand, walked in with the confidence of people who believed they already won. Namatsi arrived with a dramatic scarf wrapped around her head, acting like a grieving hero. Cato strutted in with a smug smile, while Reby kept adjusting her sunglasses like she was at a fashion show, not a fraud hearing. Their lawyer went first, accusing Aisha of forging the will, manipulating the elderly, and stealing family wealth. Every word felt like a slap, but Aisha kept her eyes on the judge, refusing to break. Then it was Nyambwa's turn. He stood calmly, cleared his throat, and said, "Your lordship, the truth will speak for itself." He plugged in the USB. The courtroom fell silent. The moment Aisha's grandparents appeared on the screen, the air changed completely. Their voices filled the room, steady, loving, and clear. They explained every detail: why they chose Aisha, how they supported her education, how they witnessed the mistreatment from the rest of the family, and why they wanted the estate protected from greed. Every sentence hit like a hammer. Namatsi covered her mouth. Reby dropped her phone. Kato's knees seemed to give way for a moment. But the judge, he listened with sharp eyes. When the video ended, he leaned forward, his expression stern. "This court sees no fraud from Aisha Kamara," he said. "Instead, what I see is intimidation, lies, and an attempt to manipulate justice." Namatsi let out a loud gasp and collapsed to the floor, wailing as if the world had ended. Kato jumped up and shouted, "This is unfair. We were supposed to get something," before storming out of the courtroom like an angry child. Reby hid her face behind her hands, too ashamed to look at anyone. The judge banged his gavel. "Case dismissed. The will stands. Aisha Kamara is the rightful heir." A wave of relief washed over Aisha, so strongly she felt her eyes fill with tears. She didn't jump, she didn't shout, she simply breathed for the first time in days. She had won. Not by fighting dirty, not by lowering herself, but by standing in the truth her grandparents left behind. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was the beginning of her freedom. After the court ruling, it seemed like the universe itself was finally balancing the scales. The judge didn't just dismiss the case. He also ordered Namatsi, Kato, and Reby to pay hefty fines for defamation and for wasting the court's time. The sums were enough to make their greedy ambitions crumble instantly. Namatsi's small import business, which she had bragged about for years, began to collapse under debt. Suppliers refused to deliver goods, and long-standing clients quietly pulled their order. Kato's car dealership, the one he had flaunted to everyone in Kizoro, was repossessed by the bank within weeks. He tried to fight it, but there was no money, no leverage, and no sympathy. Remby's little boutique lost investors overnight, and the trendy friends she had flaunted on social media vanished as soon as their money stopped flowing. Even more surprising to Aisha was how quickly their so-called support system disappeared. People who had laughed with them, attended their parties, or shared in their fake triumphs suddenly vanished. Calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped coming. Those who once whispered about Aisha in the shadows were nowhere to be found. The world had moved on, leaving her relatives exposed and alone. Throughout all this, Aisha did not gloat. She did not post about their failures or humiliate them publicly, even though every part of her wanted to. She stayed quiet, calm, and graceful. Instead, she focused on her life, her work, her dreams, and the legacy her grandparents had entrusted to her. Friends and neighbors whispered about the sudden change in fortune. "It's karma," they said. "She was wronged, but now justice is clear." Aisha smiled softly to herself, knowing it wasn't just luck or coincidence, it was the truth prevailing. Her relatives' arrogance and cruelty had built a house of cards, and it collapsed under its own weight. For the first time in years, Aisha felt free. She could breathe without fear, walk without shame, and plan her future without being dragged down by the toxic weight of the chaos that had followed her grandparents' death had finally settled, leaving her with clarity, peace, and a sense of purpose. And though her relatives struggled, she remained untouched by bitterness. In her heart, she whispered a quiet thanks to Mama Safia and Baba Idris, knowing their lessons about love, patience, and integrity had guided her through the storm. Aisha had won more than a court case. She had won herself. After the court battle ended, Aisha finally felt a sense of calm she hadn't known in years. She threw herself into honoring her grandparents' dreams, determined to make their legacy meaningful for everyone, not just herself. The first thing she did was expand Idris Gold export. Under her leadership, the company grew quickly, providing jobs for hundreds of people in Entebbe and beyond. She introduced fair wages, safe working conditions, and training programs for young workers, ensuring that the business her grandparents built would continue to thrive responsibly. Next, she focused on education. Aisha established free scholarships for rural girls, remembering how her own grandparents had quietly supported her schooling. She wanted other young women to have the same chance she had, to study, to dream, to rise above circumstances that might try to hold them back. The applications poured in, and Aisha personally read many of the letters, moved by the determination and hope she saw in each girl. She also returned to Kizoro to renovate her grandparents' village clinic. The old building was patched and worn, but Aisha transformed it into a clean, welcoming place with new equipment, medicine, and staff trained to care for the community. Villagers came from miles around, grateful for the care they could finally rely on. One evening, after visiting every part of the land her grandparents had left her, Aisha climbed the hill overlooking the property. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying memories of Mama Safia and Baba Idris. She looked out over the house, the clinic, and the fields, her heart full. "Your legacy is safe with me," she whispered softly, tears in her eyes. For Aisha, it wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about love, respect, and the promise she had made to the people who had shaped her life. Standing there, she knew they would be proud, and that she was exactly where she was meant to be.